Welcome quilters, welcome back. This is day 2 of the Charlotte's Web Sew Along, and my name is Sherry Noel. I'm going to be walking through making this block with you today using the foundation, or I should say muslin foundation method. So I'll walk you through step by step how I made it. If you are discovering this video on YouTube, then I will link in the notes on where to find my blog post and the pattern, and I think that's it. At the end of the video, I am going to share a couple of samples that I made for just a random Scrappy version. There are so many ways to put this together, and I am really loving all the ways I've tried so far. And anyway, okay, so let's get right into making the block today. Okay, so before we get into our sewing, I am cutting my template A. You will find the paper template in the pattern. I do have these acrylic templates in my shop, and I've cut myself a width of fabric. I've already cut a few of my shapes here, but I wanted to show you how I did it. So here's the previous one right here. So you're just going to lay the template out with the straight of grain, of this fabric strip. And you're just going to cut these out. And excuse me for cutting in odd directions. If you have a rotating mat, that would work quite well for this. So I've got one cut, and now I'm just going to move down and cut my next one. So there's not a lot of waste you can see if you cut this way. Now, if you want to cut, like fussy cut something and it's not on the straight of grain, you can certainly do that. I just like to do this with the least amount of stretch possible. So just continue along, cut all your parts out, and I'm going to head to the sewing machine. All right, I am at my sewing station. This is what we're going to be making, but the pink version. I've got all my little scraps laid out here, and I have one of my cut triangle shapes. And one of the things I wanted to point out about this, the way that this is cut, is we definitely want to follow the instructions, because we want this side to be the straight of grain. We don't want bias on this side, otherwise our block will really start to get wonky. And then here is one of the shapes I just cut, and I now have, you know, my straight edge on these sides. So it helps a little bit because, you know, this is all bias here. These scraps of fabric are all going to be trimmed, and they're going to be a bias edge. So it's helpful if you have your straight edge here, which is, you know, on the muslin, but not essential. If you want to cut your, you know, template A shapes here, if you want to fussy cut them, you know, don't worry about it. You just need to know to take a little more, you know, precaution when you're sewing. Just go a little slower. So the reason I have this glue stick is because I like to, or it's helpful, I find, if I just put a little like spot of glue there. And it's really not because this shifts on me, because this does actually kind of stay in place, but it's more for when we trim up. Since we are keeping our muslin in, I like to put a little spot of glue here, here, and here, and I will show you when I'm doing it. I'm noticing that my cat's my cat's fur is getting all over everything here, but okay. So I've got a little spot of glue here. I'll put that aside, and I am beginning with my pink. So I'm just lining my pink, or my first strip, right up along the edge of template A. And I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to press it open, and I can either continue to work down this side, or I can, you know, keep going back and forth between the two. So whatever works for you. Now I have, you know, all my pieces cut, but when I first began making these spider web blocks, I just worked from my stash and just took the long strips. You know, I would hold them up and just make sure they're going over both edges. And that's all you need. As long as they're over your muslin foundation, you're good. And then just trim it off. And you can work that way too, which I also really love, because you can just sit and sew and not worry about anything. So I'm gonna take this to the machine. I'll sew my first 2 pink ones on, and then we'll press it open and make sure my iron is getting hot for me here. Now I'm just pressing both of these open. And then I'm going to continue. So let's see, I think I've got white next on this side and purple on this side. So I'm just going to keep repeating until I get down to my corner. Okay, so I am down to my 2 corners now. Before I sew those, let me point out something here. So these are a little bit oversized, first of all, because I wanted to be sure that the corners are covered. So actually, I'm gonna glue that after. So just go ahead like you normally would. Place these in the corners, sew, and then we'll flip them open. Just press these out. And I am going to just put a little bit of glue on each, so when I'm piecing these together, they stay in place. Okay, so here we go. We've got another one done, and I'm going to finish sewing mine, and then I will come back and show you how I trim and join them. So I have gotten my my parts done, my triangle's done, and I'm going to put the block together now. So I just want to show you how I go about doing this. I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to work on this first one. So rather than trim the entire thing down, what I like to do is get my square ruler, and this one happens to be 16.5-inch square, which it would be easier with a 12.5, which I actually do have, but I prefer this brand. It doesn't slip as much, so I'm using this one. And let me grab my rotary cutter. Okay, so I am not worrying about this side right now. This is going to be the outer edge of my block. So right now I am just making sure that these two edges are squared. If they happen to go off of your muslin a tiny bit, or if you trim a tiny bit of your muslin, you know, don't worry about it. What we're going for is that we have a nice clean edge on both sides, and it's a 90-degree angle. So I'm going to go ahead and cut here and trim all these bits off. And okay, that one is good. And now I'm going to do this one. Whoops. I do like doing it from the back side so I can see what I'm doing here. And now I see I've gone kind of, let's see. This one is not as spot on as the last one. I'm kind of in a little bit on this side, but I want it to be, you know, a proper angle. I think I just slid a little bit. There we go. And this is part of the reason why working with the muslin is not exact. You can see I'm over a little bit on these two sides, but that is quite all right. Okay, so now I've got these two done, and I've already trimmed my orange ones like this. So I'm going to take these two to the sewing machine. I'm lining them up. I am going to sew a 1/4-inch seam here. I will turn it over and sew from here down to the point. So this is why I like this little bit to be glued, because when I'm stitching, I don't want these to shift too much. And I am not worrying about my points, because for me, this project is just an easy, fun spiderweb quilt. Okay, so I'm going to take these, I'm going to stitch down here, and then I'm going to do the same exact thing with this set, and then I will stitch down the center, and I will show you how I trim these up. Okay, so I have everything together, and this is a 12.5-inch square ruler, so I am going to line up the diagonal on the diagonal of my excuse me, block, and I'm watching to make sure that I have a 1/4 inch in each of my points, which I do here. Whoopsie. So you might have to shift it around slightly over there. Okay, I'm just going to bring it back. And these corners should be right at your seams. Okay, so I've got a 1/4 inch here, 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 and here. And I am going to go ahead and trim this square now. And I find this to be much more accurate than trimming these edges prior to sewing. Please forgive me for cutting towards myself. I think I missed a little spot. Let's see how I did, and maybe here too. Okay. All right, I think I'm good. So there you have it. So now I've got 2 blocks, and you can see how this is starting to form. And in the next video, I will have this together and share with you how I decide to quilt it. Typically, I do an all-over design. I'm not sure what I'll do. I am not a custom quilter, so I will be back with more information. Oh, and let me just share with you quickly. I pressed my seams open. I do that a lot when I'm sewing or piecing, so that's just kind of my go-to method. Anyway, okay, so go ahead and get started on your blocks, and I might make a couple sample blocks and see where those go and share those with you next. I wanted to share one other option for you, which is, you know, going totally scrappy, and you can do anything with these and your color placements. You could put, you know, a color in the center or a different color in the center of each one. There's really so many options for this, but I had a lot of this low volume, you know, sort of whites and gray and black, so I decided that I would use those for my center of this one. And then here is one of my, you know, scrappy bins. And I just pulled that out and started pulling strips of any width. And the only thing I didn't plan anything, and I actually really like how this looks. You can see all my strips are a different width. Some I have, actually have 5 in this one, but most of them I have 3 or 4 fabrics. And the only thing I was paying attention to was making sure that my my last one wasn't getting too small. I mean, this one's getting small and will be even smaller when sewn in, but that's really the only thing you have to watch for. And this, you know, gives it a little more intentional look as far as you know, my seams aren't matching up, and they shouldn't be. And it's just very freeing. So all I did was, you know, sit and cut a bunch of these template A shapes out. And then I pulled my bin over next to me, and I just kept pulling out whatever I felt like and didn't think too much about color placement or anything. And, you know, these scraps, if you have them, are, you know, from fabrics you love, I'm quite certain. So, you know, I imagine you have a style and fabrics that you are drawn to, and they tend to, you know, kind of blend together, and unlikely combinations seem to work. And my only, you know, rule in this was to keep my centers, you know, of similar color, and that was it. So I am really enjoying this. I am going away on a retreat in a few months, and I think this is going to be the perfect project for me to bring. It does make a huge mess though, because I was pulling out the strips and cutting them as I went. So I did have a bit of a disaster, but it was a fun disaster. And if you are thinking of going scrappy, you know, here's something to think about. And you can see, you know, I didn't use my darkest fabrics on the edge or my most contrasting fabrics because I didn't really want to think about it. And once this starts coming together, these, you know, your eye will tell you these are, you know, the same here, and you will start to see all the webs and it'll come together beautifully. So I'm very excited about this version too, and just wanted to share. So I will get back to my Charlotte's Web version with the Halloween fabrics, and next in the next video I will show you what I've done with that, and that will be coming out at the end of this coming week. So have a great week, and I will see you soon.